Dead to Rights is a third-person action game that is an underrated experience from the PS2 era of gaming. While on the surface level it has many of the same influences that also inspired the first Max Payne game, Dead to Rights takes those similar ideas and executes them very differently. The story, characters, and tone would fit right at home in an action film from the 80s. Dead to Rights is full of cheesy and cliched moments that only add to its charm with its funny one-liners, along with there being plenty of moments that have that charm of being so bad it's good. All of this is backed up by the foundation of the frenetic third-person shooting. The shooting provides a lot of options to the player, and the game is full of a variety of situations to try and keep the game fresh. Dead to Rights was originally a timed exclusive for the Xbox and then later released on the PS2 and GameCube. While on the Xbox, the game had a steep difficulty curve at points with limited camera options. When the game made its way to the PS2 and GameCube, the difficulty was tweaked and more camera options were added to create a better experience. I present to you a look back at Dead to Rights. The goal of Dead to Rights was to create an action shooter that featured a mystery mixed with John Woo-inspired action. Essentially, Dead to Rights was aiming to be a crime action thriller with a focus on story along with having its action rooted in Hong Kong action films. To keep up with the stylized and chaotic action, Dead to Rights was going to feature a lock-on mechanic which was popular at the time for third-person shooters. More stylized camera angles would be used for some of the brutal disarms that the player could perform. The setting of Dead to Rights would be set in modern day and feature a cop in several bad situations. The developers wanted the main character to be a good cop, but on the run as a fugitive so that the players never knew where the enemies would be coming from. The fugitive state would help to contribute to the game's pacing and how the main character would continually need to be on the run. While Jack would mainly be on his own, he would gain some allies throughout the campaign, along with his loyal dog Shadow. Shadow could assist the player in different ways, from attacking enemies to finding bombs. The focus of the combat would be on the shooting, but other situations throughout the game would help to provide more variety to the action. For example, fistfights would continually pop up. There is not a lot known about the development for the first Dead to Rights. Based on the limited information I could find, it was clear that the developers wanted to take the stylized action from John Woo movies and then combine that with mystery elements. On August 2002, Dead to Rights was released to the world. Dead to Rights gameplay revolves around third-person shooting, fistfights, and many different minigames. Let's start out with the best part, the shooting. The shooting here operates like an older third-person shooter with a heavy use of a lock-on mechanic. The player can lock onto enemies and use the right stick to change who they are aiming at. The crosshairs will let the player know how likely they are to hit the enemies. Yellow and red means you have a higher chance of hitting an enemy. The indicators help to gauge the distance of your weapon since you will be switching a lot during combat. The action is fast and frenetic, and you will be up against many different foes with lots of different weapons. One thing to note is that Jack does not reload his guns. When you are out of ammo, you will throw those weapons to the side and switch to another gun with ammo in it. If you find yourself in a situation with no ammo, you can approach an enemy and disarm them with a button press. There's a lot of different disarm moves that you can do depending on the gun that you're trying to steal. These moves are brutal, over the top, and very awesome. If you have weapons equipped and would like to disarm foes anyway, you can put your weapons away and still disarm them. Disarms are not your only options either. You have an adrenaline bar that can be used for slow-mo dives and jumps. These give you some time to take out multiple enemies quickly, along with dealing a lot of damage to boss characters. While in your slow-mo dive, you can only shoot enemies who are in front of you. Jack will not rotate his body in the middle of the air, so you need to keep this in mind when you're using this. On top of all of this, you can take most enemies as human shields. This gives you another layer of armor, but decreases your movement speed. You can also crouch behind some objects, and there is a very early stages of a cover system that can be used here, but it's very sticky and not that useful. With the lock-on shooting, slow-mo dives, disarms, and human shields, the game encourages you to continually be on the move and adapting to the shootouts. You have a lot of different options since many of these shootouts are pretty tough and they feature a lot of enemies to contend with. To gain back health, you will need to rely on armor and health pickups. Some defeated enemies will drop health for you as well. While the shooting is from an older time, it is still fun to engage in these shootouts. The lock-on works most of the time with some frustrations, but the quick movement and variety in your moveset keeps things engaging. I never got tired of doing a slow-mo dodge. I love how you can see the shell casings popping out of your guns and then they all hit the floor at the same time once the slow-mo is depleted. Dead to Rights features an impressive set of modern weapons from pistols, shotguns, machine guns, grenade launchers, and more. Since you will not be reloading and tossing your guns away as you use them, there's this sort of on-the-fly feel to the combat and situations. Like I said, the game encourages you to be on the move and you feel like you are participating in a Hollywood-style action sequence. The game comes back with a great amount of levels to enjoy as well. You have action sequences in a prison, in alleyways, in a cemetery, and more. The large amount of locations lets you get a feel for the corrupt city, along with you never feeling bored with each of the new locations. Another option in combat is how your dog Shadow can attack enemies and then bring back some guns to help you out. I love how you have a sidekick and how he can actually help you out in combat. When you have guns in your hands, the game is an absolute blast with engaging over-the-top arcadey action. The game tries to bring a lot of variety by having different situations that do not focus on the shooting. The other big parts about the combat are the fistfights. You have a nice handful of combos that you can do along with throws and grabs. The fistfights are good in short bursts, but the game forces you into fistfights for several minutes and this can be really tedious. The fistfighting does not have the same level of fun or polish as the shooting. It is a nice distraction when used in short bursts. The game is littered with mini games to complete. You will need to pick locks, survive torture, lift weights, hit a speed bag, pole dancing, and more. The mini games are mostly fine, with the bomb disarming being the most fun, but while they do help to break up the action, they can be really annoying speed blocks to the ongoing action, and overall they hurt the pacing rather than enhance it. I very much appreciate the developers' efforts to provide more variety to the game to help break up the shooting, but many of these other elements are not as strong as the shooting. Now let's get into some of the flaws. Like I said, the fist fighting is good in short bursts, but there are a handful of levels where you need to do these extended sequences and you need to beat up several guys. This can get really tedious really quick. Some of the levels can go on for a bit too long, like some of the harbor levels and the very early prison level. The entire prison level has many annoying parts, but we'll get into that in a bit. The checkpoints are generally decent, but there are a few situations where you need to complete an objective like disarming a bomb after killing a room full of guys. If you mess up disarming the bomb, you'll then need to go back and kill all the guys again before you can try and disarm it. These type of situations are really annoying. While the lock-on for the shooting mostly works, there are many situations where the game will lock onto an enemy that is further away instead of someone who's standing right in front of you. Another thing to make note of is the random spawning from some of the enemies. They seem to appear from nowhere at times, and this can create some frustration. Overall, the boss fights are not the highlight of the game. Either they are gunfights with people with large health bars or fist fights that go on for far too long. Some of the later levels feature too many doors to lockpick, and this can hurt the pacing of the shooting action. The few instances of fighting a helicopter can be a bit cheap since they have laser aim and require a lot of hits to take down. There's also a few situations where you need to grab someone, bring them to a position for them to be able to open up a door while other enemies are shooting at you. Thankfully, there are not many situations like this, but when they appear, they're kind of annoying. A lot of my general issues comes down to appreciating that the developers tried to vary up the action, but the execution just wasn't there. Some of it works better than others, like the fist fighting when used in short sequences.
Yeah, who the hell are you? Where's Patch?
Busy getting him bombed.
Oh, bloody hell.
Now let's get into the Xbox version of the game. Since the Xbox version of the game came out before the other consoles, the PS2 and GameCube benefited from having that game with some nice improvements. While the Xbox version looks the best out of the three, it also is way too hard and features no difficulty options. There are some awful spikes that hit the player early on and can turn this enjoyable game into a slog. Along with this, there's no options to change the camera settings. So in the Xbox, when you hit left on the right stick, the camera goes right and vice versa. This is really annoying and took some time to get used to. There is an option to change this on the PS2, which also makes that version a lot better. The Xbox version, combined with the issues with the prison level, really annoyed me a lot. Initially, I liked that you had an entire level set in a prison. It has a slower pacing compared to the prior two levels, and what could have been a cutscene turns into a level where you facilitate your own escape. I really like parts of this. Most of the prison features fistfights, and like I said before, once you do too many of these, it can get really old. And the prison level really gets annoying when you need to collect 25 packs of cigarettes. This felt like padding, and it really dragged this level out for far too long. You need to complete tasks for people along with different mini-games to earn some of the packs. One mini-game has you hitting a speed bag, and you need to beat the record of the other guy in under 2 minutes. You need to alternate between hitting A and B to keep a good flow going. 2 minutes is really not enough time to get this done unless you really have a good flow down. The trick is to hit the buttons right as your fist is up by the bag. Then you need to lift weights. You need to try and hit the A button and then stay within the red zone until your bar is full. Once it is, you hit the B button to use your strength. The problem with this is that the game does not always register when you're hitting the B button, and then you have several more fistfights and an annoying arm wrestling minigame. This whole part drags on for far too long, and since you will be doing a lot of fistfights, you will realize that there's another annoying area about them: breaking other enemies' grabs. If an enemy grabs you, they will do a lot of damage. You can break out of it if you hit the grab button really early, and then you won't be thrown. But the problem with this is that it's really hard to get the timing of this down, so you're probably going to take a lot of damage. So enemy grabs feel very cheap. Also, there's a boss fight in the prison where you need to fight a boss with 2 henchmen who cannot be killed. This feels artificially difficult. The prison level gets better once you start the escape because you get your guns back, but if you fall into one of the death holes, you're back to that frustration. This level is overall very annoying and can kill the motivation really early on for a new player. My suggestion would be to not play the Xbox version and play the PS2 or GameCube versions, as the game is not as hard on those versions. Or if you want, put the code for the level select in and skip this level altogether. But at the end of the level, that annoying boss guy gets beaten up by cops, and I found this really funny.
Didn't think he'd get this far without his picture book to follow. Guy like him's better left in a cage with the rest of the animals. Think you still got another 20 years to go, short stack?
Screw you!
He's over here!
When it comes to the story, the game does a good job of setting an over-the-top dumb tone with okay to bad voice acting that is so bad it's good quality to it. Where the voice acting is not that great and the characters are underdeveloped, the entire story is very entertaining. Jack is a likable protagonist. He talks a lot to himself and makes a lot of corny jokes. Jack gets framed for a murder and needs to find out who framed him along with who murdered his dad. The game is not afraid to get a bit silly at times with some funny cutscenes along with you fighting killer clowns. With all of this, I think Dead to Rights fully captures the fun from the 80s action films along with the tone. Overall, the story is charming and enjoyable. Also, the opening cutscene really does set the stage for the tone and feel of the entire game. Here are some parts from the game that I found to be pretty funny.
Hello, Officer Slade. What brings you out on a night like tonight? You want to join us? $100 ante? Or is that too rich for your cop salary?
It's real simple, Blatz. You lie, you die. I want to know why your boys knocked off my father tonight.
Whoa, hey, your old man's dead. Gee, I'm all torn up by the news.
You don't know the half of it.
Oi, look at this, fellas. Our bleeding hero. Pick him up and let's be off it.
Overall, Dead to Rights is an enjoyable and underrated game. The frenetic shooting is still enjoyable, and the amount of options that you have during combat keeps that area of the game feeling fresh the entire way through. The large amount of different locations and weapons contributes to this as well. While the fist fighting and minigames help to break up the action shooting, they can actually hinder the game's pacing instead of enhancing it. Dead to Rights is not a perfect game. It has its flaws, but the game continually remained entertaining from beginning to end. And while the story is underdeveloped, the execution makes for an enjoyable enjoyable experience. Dead to Rights is a game that I'd like to revisit every once in a while and enjoy it like a great weekend rental like when I was a kid. If you haven't played this one, I would recommend you check this out on the PS2 or GameCube.